Hi, good afternoon. I'm Adam Kennedy, a coachman here at Colonial Williamsburg, and here with me we have
Hey, I'm Andre Jeter. I'm the director of Coaching Livestock.
and
Colin Ash, apprentice coachman.
and today we're going to talk to you a little bit about our coachmen of the past and present, and not just any coachman, but our black coachmen. So what we're going to do is show you a video which is going to first tell you a little bit about the history of those coachmen and who they were and what it was they did. And then we're going to come back for a moment of some questions and answers. And it's no better place for us to do this than right here in our stable. So with that being said, here's our first video for you. Hi, I'm Adam Kennedy, a journeyman coachman at Colonial Williamsburg, and we're here in the harness room. And we're going to tell you a little bit about the black coachmen of the 18th century and their experience, and then also what they did in their day and in their roles as coachmen. Most of your carriage drivers are going to be men, typically enslaved men, but you will find some that are indentured, and there are a few that are free listed on inventories, and you will find women driving as well. The average individual that's here is not going to have accessibility to a carriage and not exactly to horses that are going to be in the best shape. So typically what we say is about 2 to 5% of the individual population that you're going to see here in town is going to have the affordability and accessibility. And if you break that down, it's probably only just shy of about 100 vehicles that you'll see going up and down the streets that are permanent in Williamsburg. But keep in mind, it is a capital city, and Duke of Gloucester is your thoroughfare, so you'll always see vehicles going up and down the roads. Some of the men and young men who were involved in working with horses included names such as Jupiter, Billy Lee, who is synonymous with Mr. General George Washington. You also have Watt, Caesar, a few others that are in this area here. And their skill was not just limited to driving a carriage. Those men were fox hunters, they were trainers, they were vets, they were farriers, they were harness makers. So those men had to be a jack of all trades and in all situations. When you think about what it was that they were doing, they start at an early point of the day, so typically before the sun even rises, to get the horses in, get them fed, checked, picking feet, and making sure that there's no abrasions on the animal, there's nothing wrong with the hoof, there's temperament changes, because if you're going to be driving or working with a 1,200-pound animal, you want to make sure that you're going to be safe. And before you put a master, a mistress, or someone on, you want to make sure that they are going to be safe as well. The other thing is that most of these men, they find themselves oftentimes being sold relatively quickly because it is a skill set that it can be desired. The one thing that they do have to their benefit is when it came time to look for freedom, most people never really think about this, but that person has an access to the roadways. He's been around the area, so people are familiar with what that individual looks like, which can be a hindrance, but can also be a blessing for that individual, as they may escape to a Philadelphia or a New York where there's loads of drivers there in a congested city. They can easily blend, but also find a new freedom or a new face. If you'd like to come on down and see us, please do. We're always here. If you want to take a carriage ride, we are still out there, and we would love to have you ride with us. And also remember, the barn is open for you to come and volunteer and learn about the Cleveland Bays and what it is we do with our rare breeds. Thank you. Welcome back. Hopefully you all enjoyed that video. And now is a great opportunity to open up for some questions if any of you have any.
Thank you, Adam. This is producer Brody Adams. I'll be giving voice to your questions this afternoon. So if you have any, please feel free to leave them in the comments. We'll try and get to as many as we can. The first question we have for you all is, how do you learn about the black coachmen of the 18th century? What kind of sources do you use to find out about these people?
So that's an excellent question. And how we find out about the black coachmen of the 18th century is a few different ways. The first thing is by using our historians who have worked here previously. So one such as Miss Wynoni Ingram. So she's done pretty extensive work there. And then the other thing is by using runaway ads and inventories. Oftentimes when people tell you that they don't know anything about the enslaved or about the coachman, all of a sudden when that person goes missing or is no longer able to have eyes laid on them, you can find those individuals and find every detail listed in those runaway ads. So the runaway ads will tell you about the height, the size of the individual, talk to you about any particular notices of their hands and hairstyle culture. So the runaway ads and inventories are our best. Peyton Randolph's and George Wiss are probably the two that we go to more than any. And any other questions? Nope. All right, well, what we'll do is we'll go to our second video. If you're fine with that, we'll let you watch another one, and hopefully you enjoy this just as much as you did the first one. So here's that video. Hi, I'm Adam Kennedy, a coachman in Colonial Williamsburg.
Hi, I'm Andre Jeter, the director of Coaching Livestock.
And today we're going to talk to you about the evolution of black coachmen past and present. From the 1930s to about 1979, black coachmen were in their heyday here. Men such as Joe Jones, Mr. Benjamin Lewis Spraggins all played integral parts in the guest experience. They oftentimes were janitors, landscapers, members of hospitality before they even stepped on the box seat. How much of that story was being told, how much of that African or black story was not being told or shared. They had a strong drive to make sure that that history was being seen, and even today pass it on to myself and Mr. Jeter.
2022, February the 28th, we did a dedication of the Benjamin Lewis Spraggin Carriage, and that was dedicated to Mr. Benjamin Lewis. He was one of 4 carriage drivers that first started up coaching livestock. He was not a native here of Williamsburg, but he came here on vacation and fell in love with Williamsburg and then applied for a job here. He was a pillar of the community. He was in the Williamsburg Men's Club. He was one of the founders of the NAACP chapter here in Virginia. And he also had a barbershop here. They referred to him as Mr. Hollywood. If you was to see a carriage on the street, you would have seen him. All your dignitaries, all your main people that was riding in the carriage at that time.
And remember, this skill, it is a highly skilled job, but it's one that was looked down upon, but because of what you were doing, you were serving. So most individuals looked at it, unless it was pleasure, then where you were gonna do a social activity where you drove, to actually be a driver was not what people want to make you believe, the all-intended job that everyone wanted. So men such as Mr. Joe Jones, Benjamin Lewis Spraggins, and Willie Fitz, they all played an integral part here. And part of that job, unfortunately, did come with some not so pretty aspects. Remember, those men at the time that we represent and at the time that they were living in, they also had some not so pleasant moments with some guests, some of the folks that worked here, and some of the staff. And as we talked to Mr. Joe Jones, who is still living, we were able to get those firsthand accounts. And that's important for us in telling that story. As Mr. Jones said himself, when his uniform came off, his color didn't. How we honor those men is through recruiting, making sure that we're able to get out into the public. The other thing, Mr. Jeter is responsible for helping to drive, the focus of the barn. So a lot of what you saw with the Benjamin Lewis Spraggins carriage, the colors, the design, and that all was a way to honor those men of the past and those that are still living, so that way we could give them their flowers while they could still smell them, see them, feel them, but also share their story with us so we know how to continue on with this legacy.
If y'all have any questions about coaching livestock and want to learn more about coaching livestock, learn about our bits and bridles, our rare breeds talk, come down here to the barn so we can learn about these African coachmen. So anybody in the community, you're welcome to come down here to Coaching Livestock and learn a little bit more.
Welcome back. Hopefully you all enjoyed that video just as much as the first. So what we'll do is the same thing. We'll see if you all have any more questions for us.
Thanks, Adam. So we have a question here. What are the biggest challenges you face while driving carriages at Colonial Williamsburg, or really for any of you?
You want to go first, or you want me?
Oh, you guys are that one.
So the biggest challenge is people. So you never know what people are going to do, what they're going to bring with them. And everybody tends to see horses as they're all grass-eating animals, which are loving and won't do anything wrong. And as we say, if you aren't prepared, that's how you end up on a YouTube video. So even though we may have dogs and trash bags and things like that, we can kind of prepare for those, but you really can't prepare for the way people move and what they'll bring with them if they have an umbrella and such. So for me, I would say it's people, but it may vary for Dre and Colin. So I'll see if Dre or Colin want to add to it.
Yeah, for me, it's just skill. So working on your skill set. being a craftsman of your skills, learning your skill set, learning to, be patient with the horses, be patient with guests, because we know guests do, they're not thinking they're here on vacation. They're walking around with ear pods in their ears so they don't hear the horses coming down the street. Like you say, sometimes they might drop something that might spook the horse. So, if you go back to your training, the way we train you, and you learn just to go through your progression, then like anything like that might end up being like something big, you can just take it to being small. So.
How about you, Kyle?
I'd have to agree with the people. You got people that'll come make the simplest mistake, like little Johnny breaks away from his parents and now he's running across Palace Green in front of the carriage. Or you got people stopping in the middle of the street to take a picture and they don't realize how close we are to coming towards them. Mind you, none of the carriages have brakes on them, so it takes at least about 3 seconds to stop them, which is a quick 3 seconds if you need them to stop on a dime.
Yeah. That's a good question.
Well, thanks. We have a lot of questions about the duties of coachmen and what they would do throughout their day. So, Barbara wants to know, were the coachmen involved? I don't know if she's asking particularly about CW coachmen or coachmen of the 18th century, but were they involved in training the horses as well, and did they have other duties beyond just driving and training horses?
Absolutely, they're going to be involved in training the horses, grooming the horses, everything from start to finish, and that even applies today. So how we go about our training and development is we get the individuals hands-on. You can't just want to do the pretty portions of the job. Everybody likes to sit up on the box and get their picture taken, but you've got to be willing to shovel the manure, pick it up. You've got to be willing to see the not so pretty parts of the job, and also deal with animals that are still thinking animals. Even though we've domesticated those animals and the horses and they have a routine, that routine can break, and there's always what we say the moment of a bad situation is really, really close. So in the 18th century to today, we like to believe that we're training very similar, except for we have the benefit to look back and say what didn't work and kind of not do those things and then improve on those. So we're very hands-on, and we know, for instance, Johnny, who was here, he was extremely hands-on and oftentimes was written about for his work with animals, and especially the horses that were of a tender age, which typically means a younger, more juvenile horse. All right, so with that, I think we're going to go into our future plans. So we've got a couple future plans, and I'm going to leave that to Mr. Jeter, who can tell you a little bit more about that since he's the director. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Jeter.
All right, thank you, Adam. So first of all, what we're doing now is to get more people down here at Coaching Livestock. We are going into the high schools. So juniors, seniors, we're working on a volunteer program. So we're beefing up our volunteer program for that to get more kids active in the community. So we're looking for people in the community that, college is not for everybody. So they might be interested in working with animals, into animal science. Also, we started our internship program that will actually kick off this summer. So if there's anybody out there that would like to come down here and intern for the summer with Coaching Livestock, whether it be a college student or whether it be a junior or a senior in high school, hey, please go online and apply. Next, what we are doing is the Randolph Stables. We are re-erecting the Randolph Stables on the Randolph property. We know there was a pretty big barn. We know it was like 12 stalls and they had 2 carriages in there. So this is going to be the central location for the Rare Breeds program. And that's significant to us because in the past, we only been doing Rare Breeds talk. Well, we talked for about an hour. Now we're going to be here 5 to 7 days a week, and we'll be there all day, and we'll have a representation of each animal that we breed here, so everybody can come and learn about the animals that we breed here at Colonial Williamsburg. And then also in March, it's lambing season. So if anybody, about the week of March, if anybody want to come down and see the little lambs, feel free and come on down. And then in April, we'll start foaling out our foals with our Cleveland bays. So we're ramping up this spring, this summer to have a bit productive summer, and then plus also I'm doing carriage rides as well.
I think we also have the cows we're going to be back to breeding this year. Darren's going to be doing those as well, right?
Yeah, so we are in the process now artificially inseminating our cows, our red Devon cows, so we can try to have some calves on the ground right here before Christmas.
Cool. So we've got any further questions for us, Brody, or anything?
Yeah, we've got a ton of questions, and
Awesome.
please, audience, if you have any more, send them on our way. So we have a question here from FF, and Mr. Judy, you may be able to answer this pretty well. Could you tell us more about the horse breeds that you all work with? Maybe you could explain the Rare Breeds program and what that is.
Yes, so the horses that we work with, well, down here, what we call our riding and our driving program. It can be any breed of horse. It do not have to be a typical breed of horses. We know in the 18th century, it was a light breed of horses that was pulling the carriages. So we are trying to get away from draft horses. And when we're looking at horses, we're looking at different breed of light horses that can pull the carriage. But at the same time, we got to remember is that we got new drivers coming along. We got guests out there on the street. So we got to have horses that's in the right frame of mind to actually do that job. And then also with our Rare Breeds program, we are focusing right now on Cleveland Bays. In the past, we have bred different horses like the American Cream, but now we have we put our focus towards the Cleveland Bays. Cleveland Bays are rare. It's less than 1,000 in the world. I think it's about 220 here in the United States. We got about 28 here on site right now, and we breed anywhere between 10 foals a year. So this is real nice because Colonial Williamsburg can help this breed out as far as trying to build the population back up. Right now they are critical, so our goal is to try to get this breed back to being threatened.
And I think also to add on to that too, some of the other breeds you'll see here, with the help of a few of our close friends up in Pennsylvania from the Amish, we were able to get 4 Dutch harness horses, which are a pretty popular coach horse today. You see those a lot in England, and today they're becoming even more popular in the U.S. because they're known for their pronounced step. So if you look at the Gelderlander, which is an ancestor of that, we've got a smaller, more refined Dutch harness horse. Then we've got a couple Friesian crosses, and some standard breds, and then a few that are just what we would call mutts. So there's anything that's involved in there. So I always say, whatever horse you like, we probably have, something of that in the barn.
All right, very cool. Thank you. So we have some people who have noticed some of the stuff that's behind y'all there, and are wanting to know what you can tell us about these carriages behind you. And Verna specifically wants to know if any of these carriages were built in Colonial Williamsburg.
So it's an excellent question, and the answer is none of these that they can see behind us were built in Colonial Williamsburg, but we have built vehicles here prior. So we do have a couple smaller vehicles and chairs that have been built here. We also have our ox wagons that have been here, and I believe there's one carriage that was built here that's actually under some restoration work right now. But I'll let Colin tell you a little bit more about the one that's behind him, and then we'll just pass it on along from there.
So behind me, you got the Spraggins carriage. This is one of our newer vehicles here. We received this one about a year ago today. Dedicated to Mr. Benjamin Spraggins Jr. It's a sociable coach. And you got the stage wagon that's behind Mr. Canada, if you want to explain a little bit more.
Yeah, so the stage wagon that's behind us here, this is more of a utilitarian vehicle. So you see that this one built very similar to this vehicle here. It's going to have the cambered wheels, a typical similar axle there, except this one has a hood, so you can use this in all types of weather, whether it's inclement, whether it's a sunny day outside and 70 degrees. But this is more for industry and purpose here, where this one is more of a sociable for your pleasure to be seen. This one was built in 1960 in Oklahoma City. And then Andre's got 2 that he can tell you about right here as well.
Yeah, so right behind me, we got the Carter carriage, and that's a road coach, and that's a typical type of vehicle that you would do for long distance. going in and out of town. You want to keep the weather off of you. You see you got your windows there where you can put blinds there, or you can put shutters there, and then you can stay warm inside the carriage. And then right beside me right here, the red carriage here, what we call the mulberry carriage. So this is one of the carriages that the Queen of England rode in 1957 when she came here and visited Colonial Williamsburg.
So we've got a good variety. And the other thing too is we do have modern vehicles as well. They're not built here, but we use our modern vehicles for training purposes. And the reason why, if we're to hit something, bump something, if it happens on a metal framed vehicle, we don't have the same amount of cost that we have to put into fixing something like this right here. And it's also got the application of a brake. So when we're teaching new drivers and newer horses, we can apply that brake as needed. And then as those drivers get more acquainted and the horses get more developed in their education, then we will start to move them to a different vehicle that doesn't have brakes, that's still a metal vehicle, and then eventually to the actual carriage itself.
All right, so you all have talked a bit about how carriages in the 18th century were more of a luxury item, but were they at all used for public transportation?
So excellent question, and they are used for public transportation at certain points. So we don't want you to think of it as being like an Uber today, because that's not going to be how it is. But you do have individuals like Robert Carter who had multiple vehicles, and he's obviously not going to drive all of them at the same time. So because of the business side of it and the profitability from that, he does rent out some of those vehicles. There's a couple taverns in town that'll also rent out vehicles as well. You'll see farmers who aren't using their horses to cart, that'll use the animal for more of a plowing animal rather than putting to them cart. So what they'll do is then rent out the cart and the vehicle. And then other individuals who are going to be owners, who are going to own multiple vehicles and also own the enslaved men and boys with them, they're going to not only rent the vehicle, but rent the horses and the driver, the footman, and the groom that's going to go along with that as well.
All right, we have another question here from Brian, who's clearly done his homework. He says, I have heard of other skilled enslaved tradesmen and women being able to do additional work for cash, which they could keep. Did coachmen in the 18th century have that same option where they could maybe do work for other people and earn a little bit of cash here and there that way?
So I'm sure that there was a possibility. As far as my personal eyes seeing that, I have not seen it. But just because we haven't seen it, just like $1 million, I haven't seen that, but we know it exists. I would say that if you look at, like Watt from the Randolph House or Benjamin from Mr. Wiss, the idea of tipping a driver is something that we're researching right now, because we've seen that some of our research puts us to about 1840, where they're tipping drivers, and then we've got a hint of some of that just a little bit earlier. And then because those individuals are going to be skilled in other avenues, like your research has shown, that i.e., breeding horses, developing the animal, I'm sure there's opportunities that will present themselves. But as far as me giving a definitive to say yes or no, I couldn't do that just yet. But good question.
All right. So another thing about the skill of the coachman of the 18th century, do we know of any enslaved coachmen who used those skills and knowledge to self-emancipate?
So we have one individual in New Kent County who's not here in Williamsburg, but in New Kent County who did. And they believe that he actually made his way up to New York City. They think by way of course, getting to Philadelphia. So those have two of the largest populations of free blacks. And because that individual was a coachman, obviously he's going to know the roads, he's going to know the rules of the road, and the whole idea of IDing themselves. These individual drivers are going to have passes or placements for themselves, because when we think of traveling today, so a carriage is going to be weighed when it enters onto a ferry or a surrey, and then also as it crosses into different areas, cities, it is taxed as well, and the belongings that are inside of it are checked, and that's been a long tradition, and that's part of because of the Fugitive Slave Act, because it was the ability for individuals to get individuals in areas where normally by foot you wouldn't be able to. You can hide an individual in a compartment. For instance, you can kind of see the trunk on the back of this stage wagon right here. You can hide certain things in there. Obviously, you're not going to put a grown adult in that, but you can put a small child in there. And then if you're traveling at night, you also have that ability to be able to harbor those individuals. So carriages will be inspected, and the drivers do actually have to have papers that are with them, believe it or not. But we do know of one individual in New Kent County that we do believe was able to use that to get himself up to New York City. None that I can research so far that are here in Williamsburg. But another good question.
All right. We got a question from Ben, who wants to know what kind of training did the coachmen of the 18th century go through, and how does it compare to the training that we have here today in Colonial Williamsburg for coachmen?
So I'll start that answer, and then I'm going to let all three of these gentlemen piggyback in. So in the 18th century, you can go back a little ways to some of the earlier moments of karting and driving and base that off of English principles. So think about mounting your horse from the left-hand side, drivers getting up on the left-hand side, everything being done from the left. And it's going to evolve based on the congestion and the development of the road. So if you look at, this is going a little bit further ahead to Edwin Howlett and Bano van Achenbach. So those are individuals who have a big almost influence in how we drive today. And part of that is they kind of took bits and pieces of other drivers and coachmen, specifically from larger, more congested cities, and they adapted those all into one style of driving. Well, I shouldn't say one style of driving, but one common style of driving. Where we would say the English coaching style or the Achenbach coaching style, and then that agricultural style where it's going to be a rein in both hands. So where you get into a city and you've got to wave, be polite, manipulate your whip, you're going to typically put that rein or those set of reins in your left hand, and the right hand becomes your accessory. And that will then transfer on from driving a single, a pair, tandem, unicorn, to a team of horses where it's 4, 5, or 6. And the most popular style that we see here in this area, believe it or not, is driving 4 horses, or what we call a pickaxe. 3 horses in front and 2 horses to the wheel. Now, as far as training, I'll let Dre piggyback in there, and then Colin can tell you about his training.
So as far as training, training is pretty much basic, simple. I like taking people that really don't know anything about horses and grooming them the way we want and develop them the way we want them to be here at Colonial Williamsburg. I mean, yes, you can have some experience, and just like those coachmen in the 18th century, when they came here, they did not come empty-headed. They had skills. They worked with animals, so that's why they worked with those animals. They know what they was doing, and you would just take a young lad and work with them, and you bring them up from the ground up. So anywhere from just picking up the horse feet, checking on the horses, checking his legs, make sure they hot, or you just make sure they warm, make sure everything good, to currying and brushing the horse off, and then just putting a bridle on the horse and getting the horse used to a bridle, and then we'll go from there. Like I say, pretty much it's simple. We start getting these horses, we start working with them in the round pen where we'll lunge these horses, or what we call long lining these horses. And then we'll go to ground driving, where we ground drive these horses, and we put the blinkers on the horses so they can get comfortable with the blinkers being on their eyes so they can see forward, and we'll be their eyes to the side. And then once we get done with that, we would take a drag and we would let them pull a drag. And I always say, if I'm out there working, they got to work too. So we'll take that drag and a riding arena or a round pen, they will drag that riding arena. They'll get used to pulling weight, and then we'll put some noise behind them because we know these carriages have metal wheels, so tires on them. So we wanted them to get used to that noise so they don't be afraid. So we can desensitize these horses as they go out on the street. And then the next thing you know, we just hook them up to a single cart, and then and we start working them that way once we get them good and working. And then we'll put them up to a pair. Some work good as a single, some work good as a pair. And then sometimes we can put some in a team like a 4-in-hand. So very basic. It's not rocket scientists. It's just working with the horse, understanding the horse. The horse got to have a clear mind. The horse has got to be coachable, got to be patient. with the horses. The same thing with our drivers. Our drivers has got to be the same way. Some of our drivers come in with skill, some of our drivers don't come in with skill. But what I have learned over the past is that the drivers without the skill excel better than the drivers with skill. But I can tell you more about that, but I can let Collins, because Collins was one of those drivers with no skill, so he can tell you his process.
Starting out here, again, I came here with no experience at all. I hadn't really dealt with horses at all. They taught me all of the basics, how to get them dressed, what to feed them, how to tell if they're lame. Excuse me. And yeah, it just goes from there. You got to be coachable. You have to be able to learn rather than just assuming, oh, I should do this, oh, I should do that, because that could get you hurt dealing with a 2,000-pound animal.
And Colin's very humble, and that's a good thing about him. So it made it that much easier for us to teach and develop Colin. But we've had, like Dre said, we've had individuals that have had on paper what looks like amazing skill, but then they couldn't put that together when you have everything going around within the historic area and still give a tour and watch two horses. One of the benefits for Colin was starting with a clean slate. We were able to start him from a clean slate, and within a 90-day program that was passed on to us via Paul Bennett, because we were able to use that and then modify what worked. We were able to then say, all right, well, Colin needs this, improved on. So if I can't do it, that's when I say, all right, Dre's got the upper hand there. So it's knowing what your skill set is and what's going to best benefit Colin, the safety of the horse himself and our guests. And it's also putting your ego to the side. If I can't do something that Dre can do, I'm going to ask him, hey, can you show me how to do that so I can get better? And the same thing, we can't be afraid to do it, because at any moment, you're always one step away or one drive away from making all the drivers worldwide look bad. So we take the training and the safety of that very serious.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. That was very thoroughly answered and interesting. So Joanna F. has a question about the women who were involved in driving carriages, because I believe, Adam, you mentioned that in the first video, that sometimes women were also involved in the driving of carriages. So how would they end up working as carriage drivers? How old were they? Were they free women? Were they enslaved or indentured? And what did they wear? How was that different from what the men would wear who were doing the same job, or was it the same?
So that's a great question, and I'll be brief about how to answer that one. So typically what you see is that women aren't going to be driving the carriages the way the men are going to be driving them. So when women are driving, it's much more of a social style of driving. So that's why you have what are known as ladies' reins, or a ladies' style of horse. So typically a bay-colored horse, or what we would call a brown or a gray-colored animal. The reason why, you want the horse to accent everything that's going to be in the picture of the individual. So the horse is going to accent the vehicle, or what we would call a gig, and then he's supposed to complement what that lady is going to be wearing. So everything from her riding habit to whether or not it's the hat and the feathers that she has. And most of those women typically are going to learn to drive, one, because they're around the animal. Two, if you're out in a rural area, if your husband's away or if the man's away and you've got to be involved with the horse, you're not going to wait for him. We know women today aren't going to sit and wait for a man to do the job. So as much as we have folks who will say, oh, it's gender-based, certain things, yes. We do know towards the 1860s, there's a couple individuals that are free women that are actually driving, carriages. And I'll actually post a link in this later for you. But in the city of Williamsburg, typically what you see with women flying are typically single, or what we call plantation chairs. And we also have one account of a lady that's here in Williamsburg who drives a tandem. That's one horse in front of the other. And that's a really, really fascinating piece, because to drive a tandem is always looked at as, oh, it's ridiculous driving, or it's very irresponsible. But the reason is most people are afraid to drive a tandem because it really shows off the skill of the driver, because you have two turning points for the horses now. So it takes a really, really sharp leader up in front and a really, really consistent wheeler that's closest to that wheel, because that's where all your steerings come from. And a great mind of the one driving. So that's an excellent question.
All right, we have a question from Tina, who wants to know about racing. So were these coachmen and drivers also jockeys, or did anyone ever get into any carriage racing or anything like that?
So that's a dangerous question with my boss standing right beside me to admit to speeding up and down the road. But in the 18th century, and this is also a good thing, we do have a speed limit today, and there was a speed limit in the 18th century. So today we keep it at under 6 miles an hour. So that essentially, if you think about the average person is going to walk a 10 to 11 minute mile. So you got 60 minutes in an hour. That's how we come up with the speed limit. You look at Jefferson and Washington's ads, you'll see that Washington preferred the pace of 8 miles an hour. So he's moving. You could be fined for that in certain areas if you were exceeding or going too fast. And also, just like today, in Williamsburg, if you were going too slow, because this was a city and Duke of Gloucester was a main thoroughfare, you could actually be fined for that. And it's not going to be a constable or police department like we think. It's going to be your neighbor who's going to then go and run to the courthouse and tell on you, because they're going to get a little pension from that as well. But if you think about the expression turning on a dime or turning on a sixpence, we have no proof to be able to say how this came about, but we think what this came about was essentially coachmen and drivers, when they get together, you've got men involved, and men are going to be egotistical. They're always going to try to see who's stronger, tougher, who's got the better skill. We do it right now. So they would place a piece of change, or we would call a pence or a dime, on the ground, and essentially if you look at the back wheel of the carriage, they would turn that, and if they could turn that and still keep the wheel on the pence or on the dime, that's where the expression of turning on a dime comes from. And with some of the carriages, you have a gooseneck, or we call a crane neck vehicle. It allows you to turn super duper sharp. So what myself and Dre always did, to anybody new, we did it to Colin. The first time we drive the Royal Governor's carriage, which is over here, you always turn that one super duper sharp for your new drivers, because they think they're going to break it. And it's just a nice way to watch their eyes get big and show off the skill. But as far as racing and carriages, nobody wants to be the slowpoke. So I'll give you a good example. When you are traveling somewhere and you look at your GPS, it tells you the time in which you're going to arrive. To me, that means my time to beat. So I'm sure the individuals were trying to, get where they could, with an exceptional pace, not dangerous, but with an exceptional pace, because that time is going to be money. And it's also going to be, how you can dictate, can you beat the weather? And if you know it's going to take 2 weeks to get to New York, do you really want to be driving for 2 weeks?
Well, I can speak to one thing there is that, being with my office right next to the Coach and Livestock area, those horses always start to move a little faster the closer they get to the barn.
They definitely know when it's time to eat.
They're getting hungry.
The end of the day is.
So we've got a question from Ben. Colin, you already spoke a little bit to this, but maybe you want to elaborate more. But how did the three of you get involved in this vocation? Obviously, it's not necessarily a very what we think of as a modern job. So how did you come to find your way to driving carriages in Colonial Williamsburg?
I heard about the job from Mr. Jeter's wife, actually, and I don't really turn down work. It was paying a lot more than my last job, so I was like, I'll try it. If it goes good, it's good. If it don't, no harm done. I don't know about the rest of these two. I mean, he already had coaching experience, Mr. Jeter, but Adam, I'm not sure if you want to elaborate.
Just like Colin, I was broke and needed something different. So I got no problem saying it. I was around horses as far as from a distance. So I've always liked animals, but to me, when I saw people working with horses when it was a nice day outside, I thought that was one of the silliest things to do. And then I would hear them complain about how much money and time they put into it. And then if we're really going to be honest, no guy has a great pickup line. So working with horses was, a nice way to start a conversation. And I learned that, right here, the skill of driving. And what got me into it was actually another driver who said that you probably won't be very good at it. So I just got competitive, and I said, I'm going to give it a shot. And it took me, I think I applied 3 times before I was able to get accepted into the barn.
Yep, my experience is a little bit different. I was raised farming, so my grandpa, that's all they did was train draft horses and mules. So coming up on the farm, you have to be a jack of all trades. So my trade is either you're going to go out and you're going to work in the field, or you're going to work with animals, or you're going to be a good handyman and be a good mechanic working on tractors and stuff. So I'm like, I didn't like the other two, and I like working with animals, so then I got started working with animals. So I've been working with horses for a very long time.
And I think to add to that, just to be quick, all three of us are community. So I met Dre, and then through just conversation, I told him about a job, and then it was on him to apply for it. And then he applied for it, he came here, and then like Colin said, it was through Dre and Dre's wife what brought Colin here. So it's a lot of word of mouth as well. And you've got 3 generations of individuals. So this is how you continue it, because as we're talking about black coachmen right now, black coaching and black coachmen, that's a rare breed itself, because I'm pretty sure, our numbers of men who drive, I think we're under 21. That's for the U.S. that are of color. So it's not a lot of us that do that.
All right, so if you've come to Colonial Williamsburg before, you've probably seen a lot of the time that there's a person riding in the back of the carriage, but behind the, I don't know what you would call it, the box, as well as also the coachman driving. So who's that person on the back of the carriage, and what is their role? And Letha Faye wants to know, was there sort of a hierarchy of coachmen?
So the first answer to hierarchy, because we get that all the time, no, because they can get sold super duper fast. And we always hear the hierarchy, and I'm going to be brutally honest, it generally comes from somebody who's trying to make slavery sound good. And what you see is typically when it's a hierarchy, how the definition is trying to be used in context is they'll say like, oh, well, they were afforded the ability to travel, but you're traveling when you don't want to. You're traveling to places that you may not feel comfortable. As far as in a community then, with those individuals that are like you, perception has a lot to do with how somebody will perceive something or see it. So if I don't know anything about you, but I see you traveling, or I see you dressed up to what I may say is fancy clothes, that individual may think, oh, look, he's a favorite. But lo and behold, they don't have to understand anything of what's going on. So the hierarchy is a big onion that we can pull back the layers on and really, really get deep into. As far as skill set, and all of these men can tell you right here, and anybody who works with horses, there is no hierarchy when working with horses, because the animal does not care about your skill. It doesn't care how long you've been doing it, and you're always just one step away from being on YouTube. So we always say the hierarchy is in somebody's mind who doesn't understand what it is that they're doing. The smart person will tell you, I'm always learning, I'm always getting better.
Yep. And then for you talking about the guy that's on the back of the carriage, that would be a footman. So the footman is an understudy of the coachman. So he's going to sit on the back, he's going to observe, he's going to learn, but he's also going to be the eyes in the back of the carriage. So when they're traveling, so he could have a pistol, because you got to remember, these are the higher gentry that are in these carriages. So you have people out there that will want to rob them because they know they possess certain money or certain material that they want to have. So that footman on the back will be the eyes in the back of the carriage. Also, he would get down off the carriage, escort people in and out the carriage, and then also when the driver get tired and sleepy, that footman can take over and that driver can stand in the back and take a break while that footman learning how to drive horses as well.
Yeah, and it gives, Colin can tell you a little bit more. It gives the individual on the back a sense of, like Dre said, what's going on, how it feels. And it's also some motivation, because it does not feel good standing on the back of that box. So Colin can tell you it's much, just like all of us, we can all say it's much more comfortable to be sitting on the box rather than standing on the back, because there is no suspension where you're standing. You'll feel every bump in the road. So.
No shock absorber, no nothing. And then riding around with somebody like Adam, if they go behind the Capitol or what have you, that's all shells. You feel cobblestone and shell.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
You learn to hold your mouth open on rocks.
All right. Well, we have a question from Brian here. Since we're talking about the history of black coachmen in the 18th century as well as Colonial Williamsburg, do you find that the public is more open now and comfortable talking about enslavement in the 18th century? And how have those conversations gone for you all?
it's going to vary depending on, who you talk to here. Because you can look at us, we all, present different styles of black. So, I mean, Dre's much, larger, broader than I am. So somebody may say, oh, man, he looks intimidating. Somebody may look at me, the sun's in my face, and they go, oh, Adam looks mean today. Or if they saw me, smiling, that might be more approachable. And then Colin, who's more reserved, somebody may say, oh, well, he's shy, or I don't know if I should approach him. I think all of us will have like different answers there, so I'll let us all answer. For me, I still see it as, kind of the same, where it depends on how it's been set up. So if they've gone to a building or had a conversation with a colleague before us, I think that does a lot for how they ask the questions and how they ask more about the enslaved, which leads to the fact that we have a big job with all of us in the foundation, not just myself. So each one of our engagements, opens and makes that conversation that much more accessible and easier for somebody to have and listen to. So I'll let Dre and Colin answer.
Yeah, I see. As far as talking about enslaved or talking about the black coachmen, the younger audience have more acceptance. The older audience, they have this pre-notion that what their parents have taught them or what they have learned through school and the history books, that they know everything. So it's not like I'm just going to go and just beat it over their head. I would just tell the story, I will plant the seed, and then from there let that seed manifest. And then when they go home, I will give them, I will provoke them to actually think about or challenge what they have learned over the years and say, hey, there's more than one way to think about stuff, or there's more than one way to see stuff. And, they might see black coachmen in one light, but when I plant that seed, when they go home, they start talking about it, they might see it in another light. So all I'm doing is planting a seed. Hopefully they can do their research and do their homework, and then they'll come up with their own theory.
How about you, Colin?
In my experience, and just off of opinion, you got like 3 different types of people that come here. People who actually care and like want to know more about it. You have people who heard things and they are confirming it and see if you're going to glorify it as well as what they've done.
Yeah.
Or people who just don't know in general.
Yeah.
It's all based on how you interpret what you know about it, what you say that could correct how they're thinking about it.
Yeah, and everybody's got a different education back home too. So sometimes I know we all have a bias where sometimes I'll look at something and go, oh, they don't want to learn. But it's not that they don't want to learn; it's they don't know how to ask that a question. Because how you ask something, perception goes a long way. So I mean, if you ask something and it's perceived as, oh, he was trying to be funny, or he just wanted this answer, I mean, that can turn somebody away really quickly. So, I mean, part of it is we have to, step back too and see how they're bringing that information to us and how that information was brought to them.
All right. Well, we have one final question for you gentlemen today. As we talk about the legacy of black coachmen from the 18th century, from Colonial Williamsburg's history, what do you hope that your legacy will be?
Well, as far as me being the director of Coaching Livestock, what I want to do is pay homage to these black coachmen. They paved the way from us. They paved the way for us. They got Coaching Livestock started. I mean, they worked during the enslaved, worked during that period of time, which was very difficult, very rough. You got your 19th century coachmen that worked through the Jim Crow era. That was tough as well. So my job is to make those guys proud, keep doing what we're doing, keep going forward, try to add more African American down here at Coaching Livestock, and just keep the tradition going of the black coachman.
And I think for me, it's just like the animals are here. We have to be willing to admit that this is rare and that it's not the easiest thing to do. And just because it's not easy doesn't mean you run away from it. It means you should run towards it. And in order for me to be able to get people like Colin here, for Dre to be able to continue, we've got to be willing to be vulnerable ourselves. And I say that we're rare, and it's not to be like, ooh yeah, come touch us or anything like that. But it's to go to show you that if the majority of this town, not 52%, but the majority of the town was enslaved and people of color, you would have saw this so much that you wouldn't have thought about it. And now to see that in the last 25 years, where it's almost become non-existent, you've got to wonder why, and you've got to be willing to, see what you can do about changing that, and not force people to, because a lot of the times it's the perception. As Mr. Joe Jones said, when he retired, he said he knew it was going to be about 20, 25 years before they got another black guy in there. And it was almost 20 years before they got another black guy in. He retired in 2002. I started in 2013. But now we've got 3. We've had 5. Some have gone to other jobs and things. But we're trying, because it's all about how you try and how you paint that picture. Because everybody who comes here, black or white, should feel good about when they leave that they saw themselves in Colonial Williamsburg and that the truth was told. And I want Colin, because he's the one that's going to continue this. Myself, no, we're not old, but it's going to Colin now. So he's the one who's bringing everybody else. So it's on you, man.
I got to follow that up. Make the job more attractive to younger people. A lot of people, as far as locals, don't want to work here because they feel like you're basically a slave. You're playing a slave. It's all in perspective. You gotta, if you can either tell the story properly or you can trust somebody else to do it. But that's what's making this less attractive. People are getting mixed stories about what's going on here.
Yeah, and we've got to be willing to let people know who we are versus who we aren't. And I think by the 3 of us, the production crew, and the folks that are here now, we're moving in the right direction for that. So I think we'll be there.
All right. Well, Andre, Adam, Colin, thank you all so much for joining us today. This program was made possible through the generosity of our donors. Thank you. To learn how you can contribute, please follow the links pinned to the comments below or join us at colonialwilliamsburg.org. Gentlemen, do you have any closing remarks for our audience today?
Yeah, so closing remark would be, instead of researching or hearing false information about Colonial Williamsburg, come down here, take a trip to Colonial Williamsburg, learn about Colonial Williamsburg. I encourage everybody to come down here to Coach Livestock. You can learn about the black coachmen of the day. You can learn about the rare breeds animals that we have here. So I encourage everybody to, do something different. Take a chance, come down here to Colonial Williamsburg, learn the truth, learn the facts, and then that way you can have your own opinion.
And I would say to piggyback on that is we like to talk, so don't be afraid to have a conversation with us. We're all real people. And the biggest thing for me is, remember, you're a part of that story too. So you're a part of our nation's truth.
Don't be afraid to try new things. You never know how it could end.
So with that being said, I think that's all we got for you. How's that, Brody? Y'all have a good one.